On today's bonus episode, I go through Marco Rubio's infamous robot lines where he repeats himself 5 times in a single debate. This is Cringe Posts. Hello friends, welcome to this bonus episode of the Cringe Posts podcast. My name is Donald, my co-host Britt is out today, so we're just doing a small bonus episode, but this is the show where we gather the cringiest political and cultural takes that we find in our feed, and we tell you what's wrong with them and why they're goofy and, of course, all that good stuff. But today we're doing something a little bit different since it's a bonus episode. I'm going to go back to sort of thinking about cringe moments rather than an individual post. And so we're going to go ahead and look at the infamous debate in the 2016 election. I believe it was actually sometime in 2015 because it was during the Republican primary. But the moment where Marco Rubio went sort of robot mode and repeated a line over and over, and it's really cringy. So we're going to be watching this video. For audio listeners, it's actually going to be sort of a jump cut of multiple times of him repeating this line at different moments in the same debate, not all one moment. So it's a little bit easier to tell visually. So if you are checking this out on our YouTube, you can see that. Otherwise, you'll just have to listen in. As a reminder, if you can subscribe and leave a comment, all that good stuff, leave a review, it helps us out if you're enjoying the show. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and listen to this cringe moment, and then I'm going to give some thoughts and analysis on why it's so bad. Obviously, it's a funny moment, but there's a little bit more to it that I think underlies the whole experience. So with that being said, here we are.
And let's dispel once and for all with this fiction that Barack Obama doesn't know what he's doing. He knows exactly what he's doing. But I would add this, let's dispel with this fiction that Barack Obama doesn't know what he's doing. He knows exactly what he's doing. We are not facing a president that doesn't know what he's doing. He knows what he is doing. This notion that Barack Obama doesn't know what he's doing is just not true.
There it is.
He knows exactly what he's doing.
The memorized 25-second speech.
Well, I think anyone who believes that Barack Obama isn't doing what he's doing on purpose doesn't understand what we're dealing with here.
Okay, so there you have it. And what's great about that, for those who are listening and not seeing it, that's 5 individual separate moments where he says this exact same catchphrase line. And obviously, it's just funny to hear him almost beat for beat repeat himself in this fallback, I'm nervous on stage, I don't know exactly what to say, I don't have any ideas to back up what I'm saying, so I'm just going to repeat this tested well behind the scenes line. And in particular, one of the moments in there is actually pretty close together. There's one moment where he's, I think, responding to a question from Chris Christie or some, exchange between them. And then it cuts to him saying it again. So in that same exchange, I think he says it once and then Christie responds. And then he says it again in his rebuttal to Chris Christie. And that's when you hear Governor Christie respond and say, call him out on that. So there's the obvious goofiness of falling back on this catchphrase, right? You're nervous and you don't have a lot of content that you're saying, so you have to repeat this phrase that you've probably gone over with 20 people who have polled it in different audience groups and tested it out to see if it works. It's all manufactured. None of it's organic or real. It's all manufactured in this silly, goofy way. And it's not just Marco Rubio, right? This isn't a particularly insightful or deep point, but this is all politicians. This is what politicians go for. They go for sound bites over ideas. And I'm not saying that every single slogan politically is wrong. I mean, unfortunately, just based on human nature, our attention spans are shorter. We're going to be wanting to digest these small phrases rather than take in lots of detailed, complicated information. But the slogans need to come after the ideas, not before. This repeated catchphrase over and over is not really saying that much, and it's not even sort of a witty slogan to encapsulate a bigger idea. It's just a fallback manufactured phrase. But I mean, like some slogans are fine. I would say end the Fed, for instance. Now, if all we did was say end the Fed, us meaning Liberty people, I should clarify, and sort of the Ron Paul crowd, that would probably not be a very helpful slogan. It would probably be kind of stupid and silly. But the fact is, to a painful reality, libertarians often are good at over-explaining what end the Fed means and the harms that the Federal Reserve has caused, to the point where the fact that we have a small, quick catchphrase for end the Fed is great, because otherwise they're going to go on and you're not going to have anything to take away and remember. But again, the slogan comes after the idea. The slogan comes after that policy position has been formulated and thought about, and the harms have been explained, and it gets boiled down and reduced to end the Fed, and then it becomes a slogan. And I think that's helpful, but if all we are saying is end the Fed, that wouldn't be great. If Ron Paul was on that debate stage and he said, well, I just think we need to end the Fed, and then didn't explain the harms, didn't explain how or why, it wouldn't be very helpful. I think another good example of a slogan is it's not new, but it's being repopularized by Corey DeAngelis. Fund students, not systems. And this, of course, is the slogan that is being used to promote school choice, education bills that have public funding that is going to public schools follow the students instead of funding the schools. So just because a kid lives in a particular zip code and that school district would normally receive the money, these bills want to direct those funds to follow the student, should they choose an alternative school like homeschooling or charter schools or private schools. And again, this is a great slogan because it distills it's not super complicated, but the more complicated idea of money following the students through this education choice idea into a catchy alliteration phrase: fund students, not systems. But again, if that was all you were saying, and if you got up on stage and you just said fund students, not systems, you didn't explain, again, the benefits of school choice, the harms of the public education system, how the policy operates, why it's important, all those things, then it's just an empty catchphrase. And frankly, that's how most politicians operate, because it's very easy to get up on a stage and say, I'm for small government, or the best government is the least government, and everyone cheers. But when you don't actually explain the harms and explain your philosophical principle behind that, or why, or specific ways in which you want to make the government smaller, then you end up with sort of the classic Republican who talks a good game when they're running for office, and then they get in there and they vote to increase police funding because they don't want to face the town hall where people get mad at them for that. And then you end up with really inflated budgets all over the place. And then the Democrats want to increase budget, and you want to increase military budget, and you shake hands and each of your sides walk away happy. So that's kind of the frustrating thing about these catchphrases. The other aspect of this, of course, is that it really highlights the facade that these debates are. Everyone talks about the debates and they put so much emphasis. I mean, even the Libertarian Party in the last few cycles, or, let her debate, let Joe debate. And if only Gary Johnson had gotten on the debate stage with Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, but really, the debates are nothing more than entertainment. And if you are seriously forming your voting decision around a debate performance, you're informing your decisions based on performance art. You're informing it on a performance, a rehearsed play, one where you have these lines that you're ready, that you've tested out, that you want to win, but you're not taking into account the track record of the individual, their voting history, or their life in business, what they've created, what values they have. Those things are so much more important than 1 2-hour night on a Tuesday, So it's frustrating that these debates hold this place of prestige in our election cycle, because really all they are is performance art, as you can see with Marco Rubio's little shtick there. If he had been on a whim talking, not in this rehearsed mode, he probably wouldn't have repeated that catchphrase 4 times in a specifically worded manner like that. You would actually maybe get to hear him think a little bit when you're asking him questions that he's not necessarily scripted for, right? Not unprepared, but not scripted for. And that's the biggest thing is these debates, you know what kinds of questions are going to be asked. You do opposition study on everyone else to know how to smash their position with a strong exchange. It doesn't matter if what you say is accurate if it comes across flashy. I think that one of the great moments of the 2016 Democrat primaries, or what maybe it was the 2020 Democrat primaries, was when Tom Steyer, the environmentalist billionaire, goes I am the only candidate on this stage who is willing to say that climate change is the number one existential threat we are facing. And then Biden just goes, no, I'll say it. And what's funny is that Biden doesn't have to mean that, right? Biden can just go in and say, I'll say that. And then it makes Tom Steyer look bad, makes him look stupid. Biden gets the credit. And then he also doesn't have to hold up to that because it was just a catchphrase moment. No one else probably remembers that. And frankly, I mean, as much as I don't love what Biden's been doing on environmental regulations, he hasn't been treating it like it's the number one existential threat. They've been treating that more like the January 6th protesters are the number one existential threat. But that, all that aside, it's these debates are really performance art, and we put too much emphasis on them. And I think that's one of the reasons why Donald Trump had such appeal, was that he smashed through that mold. And again, it's all about entertainment, so that's another aspect. But he felt like he was coming off the cuff, like he wasn't rehearsed. And so that was in great contrast to these very robotic formal debates. And I think on this particular debate, I could be wrong, but I believe Donald Trump was not at this one. I think this was one that he boycotted for some reason, or they didn't invite him or something like that. And so it's really funny that in that environment, you have the absolute opposite of this guy who says whatever comes to mind, and you have this repeated talking point from Marco Rubio coming out. And akin to that Donald Trump persona, I think Chris Christie really wanted to be that. He wanted to be the straight talker, the realist, the I'm going to say what I mean kind of guy. I'm not rehearsed. And so him pointing out that Rubio was repeating these lines over and over, that was great. Probably the only good thing he's done. But even that persona shouldn't lead you into believing that it's not performance art, because it absolutely is. Christie pretending to be anything of a conservative or small government person, that's also all an act. So even if he's, pointing out this and he's a real guy, he actually doesn't have any principles. I mean, I saw him speaking to this group that was supposed to be free marketers. I think it was a lot of Republicans. And he talks about how when he was governor, he used disaster funds to pay for school choice expansion, I believe, or maybe it was just school in general. I don't exactly remember, but it was because he said that there was an education disaster. He's like, I don't think that's what the funds were there for, but we used them for that. And people laughed and applauded. And I'm like, okay, so really this idea about small government is a ruse, because you're using funds in a corrupt manner, taking authority away from how that money should be allocated, legislative authority, and then the executive authority overrules that, uses it for purposes to grow another sector, and now you owe that, because frankly, it's one of those things where I don't want government in general. I don't want government taking my money. But if you have government funding going to a specific project, you don't want that project robbed, because all they're going to do is tax you more to make up for it being robbed, because they're going to say, well, now we don't have disaster relief funds prepared, so now we got to raise property taxes and stuff like that. So even in these sort of conventions of I'm a realist, I'm a small government conservative, I'm not going to play this rehearsed game, they also play games with these naming conventions. Oh, it's disaster relief funds, well, this is a disaster over here, so I'm going to use it there. It's all empty, it's all meaningless. And politicians are just cheesy through and through. So the last thing I'll say about this particular moment is the point that Rubio is making, ironically, is actually correct. If you've forgotten in the last 10 minutes or so, Rubio said, let's dispel with this fiction that Barack Obama doesn't know what he's doing. He knows exactly what he's doing. And I think that point is right pretty universally to most politicians. They know what they're doing. They know that when they're saying these rehearsed lines, they know that when they're committing this performance art in front of people, that's all it is, performance art. And they're just going to go back to voting with whatever the party line is. They're not going to actually make any sort of real agendas that are difficult decisions and smalling down a ever blossoming government. These things aren't going to happen. And it doesn't matter if you're saying these through repeated, tested lines that are focus group perfected, or if you're taking on the persona of quote unquote being real, like the Donald Trump or the Chris Christie approach. It doesn't matter if you're taking either of those approaches. Most people who do that know what they're doing and that it's corrupt. and that they're just there to get their paycheck and not cause a fuss. There's a few exceptions to that, but the vast majority of politicians are that way. And so, I would rather people think that government is like so inept that they can't do things and it should be shrunk and defunded. But like when you see this level of phony that all the public servants, quote unquote, are, it becomes more obvious that it's not a matter of they're just inept and can't do things. It's like, yeah, they're inept, but mostly they're malicious. Mostly they're putting on this show, they're putting on this act, and maybe you started out with good intentions, but at a certain point you realize it's easier to keep the paycheck, keep the exchange of, once I get booted out of office, I'll go take a job with this lobbyist corporation or this corporation here, and we'll feed into each other, and and so it's like, yeah, sure, government can be inept, but frankly, it's more insidious than that. At best, they are apathetic and they don't do anything and they just stay silent in order to collect their paychecks and keep their positions of power. And at worst, they are actively trying to grow things, actively trying to accumulate power for the self and grow not only the government's reach in general, but in particular their own. And you think about this in like a business setting, and the people who are speaking these corporate catchphrases that mean nothing, in a small business, they don't stick around, because the smaller the business, the more each person is responsible for to make sure the business works. The more inflated and corporate-y a business gets, the more sort of fluff there can be. And that's why you have corporate speak as a corporate thing. Most small businesses don't really run on that. And even if they do, usually the people speaking them actually have meaning behind those phrases, and they have to show how it applies and provides value. That's not the case with really big corporations. I think, anyone who's worked in a big corporate environment has seen those people who speak entirely in meaningless catchphrases, and at the end of the day, you're wondering, what did you even do? And I think that can happen when the business gets so big that you lose accountability and you lose a direct tracking of what value each person's providing. So you get these Rubio-esque robots in big corporations. And what is the government if not the biggest corporation with the least accountability? It is the world's biggest monopoly. And so, of course, that's going to be the archetype of the politician, who is the person who, has to look flashy and look like they know what they're doing to get the job. They don't actually have to do anything of value. They don't have to provide anything. They don't have to give you a track record of providing results. They just have to pretend that and use the best polling phrases and over and try to make sure that gets associated with them so that the voters think that they're doing a good job, but ultimately no one's really holding them accountable to providing value, because it's the government. What are you going to do about that? That's all I've got on this for this bonus episode. Thanks for sticking around. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll catch you on the next one. Take care.